Now, you entered into trade negotiations with this thing. You think you cut yourself a pretty good deal. Well, guess what? Regardless of how ironclad you think that trade agreement is, they break trade agreements all the friggin' time. There is no way that you can lock down that trade agreement to keep them from opening up another trade agreement with somebody else. That trade agreement can be revoked at any time. What's more, that entity that you entered into that trade agreement with also happens to have an ally. That ally could be hundreds or thousands of miles away, but that umbilical cord is mighty long and mighty strong. And if her ally has been engaged in war activities, in a long, protracted war, with a previous owner of a trade agreement with them, they have access to all kinds of, what am I trying to say here? They've got access to all kinds of tactical knowledge. They have an unmatched database that they can mine data and tactics from. All right, now, once that entity calls on the hotline, that red hotline, all bets are off. You are, like I said, you're walking into a full-blown throwing lead battle with an airsoft gun. You are not ready for this shit. Long before the trade agreement started to go south, long before the mine shaft was fenced off and you couldn't get to the mine shaft, the individual in question has already been talking to an ally with superior experience, and they have devised a war plan. This war plan has been put in place probably for years, probably from the outset of your trade negotiations. And you don't know what in the hell is ahead of you. It's bloody. It's going to be brutal. You're going to get hurt. That is the way it is. Accept it. You will get hurt. What I would suggest is that you isolate whatever other assets that you have. You need to safeguard those assets as best you can. You need to get them hidden. Just remember, you're not in war with just this entity that you've entered into the trade negotiation or the trade agreement with. You're in war with every ally that she has. All right, and they have a hell of a lot more resources than you do. It's kind of like, if Russia was going to, go to war with Luxembourg. They don't stand a friggin' chance. So, be aware, Luxembourg. All right, the first thing that you screwed up on was you started negotiating the problems that you have with the trade agreement. And you put the individual on notice that there were problems. Maybe you thought it could be saved. Well, guess what? Negotiation, everything from the get-go, has been about what can be gotten out of you. That's what it was about. You were wanting access to that mine shaft, and by golly, it was not going to come cheap. All right. Whether there's any diamonds in that mine shaft or not is irrelevant as far as they're concerned. As far as they're concerned, The important thing is that mine shaft, and that mine shaft exists. Even though that there's nothing of value in that mine shaft, it exists, therefore it is priceless. That's what the thought is. But from your perspective, you've been down there, you've took a look around, it's just a fucking hole in the ground on a fault line that's unstable. There's no value in any of this. This whole trade agreement that you've got is completely and totally worthless. It's all one-sided. But the thing is, fairness does not come into play. Fairness doesn't have anything to do with anything. This has 100% to do with what is your position, what is the negotiating position that each party is in at the time. They have you over a barrel because, by golly, you have committed to that trade agreement. Now, and the starting point for negotiations going forward is this point. They're going to negotiate to here. You're wanting to negotiate over here. But from their standpoint, all this stuff over here doesn't mean shit. This is what they've got. They want more. So what winds up happening is you negotiate this way. Maybe you get to here. Maybe you get to here. Many times, with the court's help, they get to here. Never mind what's over here. So, now you've started this, you started negotiating, and you've brought up some issues with this trade agreement, and you think that it really isn't to anybody's benefit. Well, it's not to your benefit, at least. It's to their benefit greatly. Number one, this ally of hers has been supporting this entity for many, many years. It's been nothing but a drain on them. It did promote some benefit to the ally at one time, as long as the relationship was relatively new and somebody else is in the picture, and as long as both individuals, the mother and the father, and maybe the father was kicked out, whatever, the child was there. And that child was brought into this world by both these other people. Now, even if they split, as long as that child exists, and as long as that treaty, that ceasefire is in place between these two individuals out here, that means that there is an obligation to support this other entity. All right, it's kind of like Russia, China, and North Korea. Okay, as long as North Korea was brought into existence by the other two communist superpowers. All right, now China is still propping up North Korea, because the last thing that North Korea wants is a humanitarian crisis on its southern border, and then all of these people come flooding across the Chinese border and wreaking havoc with the Chinese economy. All right, same thing. The last thing that the mother wants is for her little North Korea to come running back and fuck up her life, because now, now that she's been married, she's not the mother's problem anymore. Okay? Not legally. Emotionally, yeah, and to a certain extent, I don't know. But The important thing to remember here is that there is an incentive by the mother to maintain that trade agreement that you entered into so that she doesn't have to fork out any resources in order to support her little North Korea. Now, you entered into this trade agreement, and even before the ink was dry, plans were made. If shit went south, this is what you do. Well, shit went south, and the first thing you did was you fucked up because you let them know it was going south. They pulled out their war plan, and they put things into motion. And you're playing catch up. For a long time, you thought, oh, gee whiz, it could be saved, or it could be fixed, or, there's issues with the economy in little North Korea, and how do we fix these issues? Maybe you could influence the leadership in a way to make them become less confrontational. That didn't happen, That whole family in North Korea, they have been playing by the same playbook for generations. Guess what? Same thing in her family. They've been playing the same game for generations. They are well practiced at it. They've watched it. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. So, and like I said, the most dangerous thing you've done has been paintball. They've been right on the edge of total thermonuclear war. They've had conventional warfare. They've had tank warfare, large force on force. They've been involved in guerrilla warfare. Now, what I'm advocating is guerrilla warfare on your part. Guerrilla warfare only works by making it more expensive for the war to continue than if they get out. That's the only way it's going to work. You don't have the resources, and you cannot get the weaponry that they have. You are denied by law to have the weaponry that the opposition does. Women, just because they have the golden vagina, have access to weapons of mass destruction that you are not allowed to have. And it will be held up in world court. So, your only hope is to be more brutal than what they are, and to hide your resources. Dig your holes, dig your tunnels, start hiding the resources, make it difficult for them to find the resources. In Vietnam, the thing that was going on there was, guerrilla warfare, hiding stuff. You got resources clandestinely to the Viet Cong. That country was tunnelized like a son of a bitch. You never knew when people were going to pop up and then just disappear. And the thing about guerrilla warfare, the way it works is if you make the superior power come down hard on the local populace, then what you're doing is you're driving the local populace into the arms of the guerrillas, because the guerrillas can say, look at how badly you are oppressed by these people, come support us because we're fighting for you. Whether they are or not, that's beside the point. The point is that through the guerrilla warfare's actions, through the guerrilla's actions, you set a scenario up where it's a no-win situation for the superior force. Now, your opposition is also versed in guerrilla warfare. They know how it's done, they're good at it, and they've been doing it for generations. So, be aware that they will know what's going on. They will suspect what's going on. All you can do is to be clever enough to get shit hidden in such a manner so that they can't get to it. The other thing is you need to put it in another country that is shielded by law from this conflict, so that legally they can't bring suit to acquire said assets.